Time for the meeting has arrived. This is the regular scheduled meeting of the Ways and Means Committee. For members of the committee, the agenda is going to be changed just a bit. We have, for consideration by the full committee today, two bills. House Bill 48 by Representative Jay Powell and House Bill 95 by Representative Jay Roberts. Both chairmen have their own committee or other committees that they got to be involved in, and so I'll call those bills first. First on the list, House Bill 48, Representative Jay Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill is one that passed the General Assembly, both the House and the Senate, by overwhelming margins last year, and is being presented again because it was vetoed by the governor last year. The bill basically provides an addition to the existing Freeport exemption. The existing Freeport exemption exempts goods in process of being manufactured and also goods that are held in warehouses for either transshipment out of the state or on the site of the original manufacturer. And what this bill does is extends to those types of inventory all other inventory. So effectively, if a community adopted the Freeport exemption as to all types of inventory, then there would be no ad valorem inventory tax. This is a local control issue because it allows local governments, both municipalities and counties, to call for a referendum to adopt this additional Freeport exemption, and will allow the local governing body to exempt at levels of 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100% so that they can phase in the exemption so that it does not adversely impact their budget and tax base. And with that, I will be happy to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions from members of the committee? I see none. What's the pleasure of the committee? Motion's been made and seconded that do pass for House Bill 48. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. Thank you, Representative Powell.
Thank you, sir.
Next bill is House Bill 95 by Representative Jay Roberts.
We've got the J Caucus working down here today.
I noticed that, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to bring this bill back again before this committee. And Governor Perdue, I guess in his infinite wisdom, decided that the J Caucus last year didn't present very good pieces of legislation because he vetoed mine as well. But this is the same bill with one exception that we brought before this committee and actually passed overwhelmingly in the House and the Senate as well. And if y'all remember back when we passed the Land Conservation Act, this was some cleanup language. Basically, we felt like at the time the language that we had written in the bill basically only allowed that the breaching party would be subject to the back taxes and fines that were owed. And the Department of Revenue said that that was not the way it was written, and so they decided that not only the breaching party, but every acre that was in that original covenant would be subject to back taxes and fine if that covenant was broken. So what this legislation seeks to do is make it so that only the breaching party would be subject to the back taxes and fines. There is one change in this bill versus the bill that we had last year, was that we added a section in there that would allow you, if you go out and you buy land that's adjoining property that's already in your covenant, then you can enter that land into that existing covenant. In other words, if you buy 50 acres and then adjoins that 200 acres, then you could add it into that covenant. If not, you wouldn't be able to enter it into that covenant. So that's the only part that we've added into it. Other than that, the bill's exactly as it was written last year and passed through this body. Be glad to answer any questions, Mr. Chairman.
The Majority Leader has the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the author of the bill, is there a fiscal note for the additional language?
No, sir. We do not have a fiscal note for the additional language.
You know, it could be a significant impact to, I guess, local government revenues. It would seem that might be appropriate.
Well,
Is
they
there a
would
reason
be
you don't want to have one?
they would be made whole as they currently would under the current bill, the current law, or partially whole.
How so?
The state reimburses the cities and the county, or the counties for it. Under the bill that we passed, it was a constitutional amendment. The state then reimburses the local governments. Not wholly, but partially.
So the part that they don't reimburse them, though, would be a substantial additional reduction in local government revenues, would it not?
Well, the original fiscal note that we had 3 years ago up until this point that we currently have is not even half of what the fiscal note said is what it's costing the state. I will say this, I personally don't see how it changes whether you're going to add the 50-acre part to it, or I shouldn't say 50-acre, but the new part that we have in the bill, to me, doesn't really, one way or the other, affect it, because it's still any other currently there are those that have not put this land into this covenant because of the fact that they could subject their stockholders or whatever to the possibility of somebody breaching the covenant if they sell off 200 acres, and then they would be subject to the back taxes and penalties owed. So just by having a part in there that would allow you to go in and add land that's joining that covenant that you may purchase that's currently not in the covenant, I don't see where that really affects or has an impact versus anybody else that may go in and add 200 acres to the covenant. To the program. I don't see where that part of the bill actually has any effect. And you and I can disagree on that if we need to. I'll take it up with you tonight at the department. Short sheet your bed or something. No, I'm just playing. In all seriousness.
Mr. Leader, are you satisfied or done with that? Or,
I am, thank you.
Secretary Sims has a question.
On page 7, line 219 and through 228, is this basically explaining the breach? Is that what that does? Will you explain that to me, please? I just want to make sure I understand.
Well, this is where it's basically it is, and it's talking about in there the arm length transaction. And that's what they're trying to address there to try to get around. And this was one of the points that the governor was making when he vetoed the bill last year, that he was concerned that others might try to get around the covenant by going out and creating dummy corporations or whatever, so that they might be able to get around that covenant and be able to go in and develop it. And this is where it's talking about the arm's length transaction, so that you've got to, in other words, it's got to be a bona fide transfer.
I understand. So that this would prevent a $10 transfer, between two parties, and so that somebody could develop land. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I was trying to get to. Thank you.
Representative Flood has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just have a question, Mr. Chairman. In the contiguous land, what would be the process for adding that land into the covenant?
You'd have to take it down to the courthouse and enter it into the same covenant as you originally did, or through whatever agency. But it would be through your courthouse. But you got to show that it's contiguous, and it's got to be. In other words, right now, if you bought 50 acres that was adjoining land that you already had that was in the covenant, you couldn't enter that 50 acres because it's not 200 acres, and you got to have at least 200 acres to have that covenant. So you'd have that land there and not be able to put it into a covenant. What this allows is for an individual to go down and enter it into the same existing covenant that they currently have that's adjoining that land or is contiguous with it.
Is there a further question?
Sure.
Is there a minimum acreage required to add to the covenant?
No.
So someone could add a half acre or 2 acres or?
Yes.
Thank you.
And the majority leader has reconsidered. He has another question.
Following up to what Representative Flood was saying, if it adds to the prior covenant, and I'm not opposed to this or trying to attack on this, I'm just really confused. Would it be under the same time limitations, the 10-year limitations?
Yes.
That the original. So if I add 100 acres to existing 200 in the 9th year, I'm actually going to receive a covenant treatment for 1 year of that extra land.
Correct. Well, but
So I would, if I took it out of the covenant after 1 year, I wouldn't be penalized. So am I not getting to kind of game the system a little bit there, or am I confused? Which I think I obviously am. But
15 years is what the covenant is under this plan. And I guess, Mr. Chairman, if you would allow me, could I defer to the former chairman of this committee and the author of the original bill as we took it through and ask him to clarify it?
That's sort of a stretch.
I was trying to. I was fishing. I was fishing, Mr. Chairman. I was fishing, Mr. Chairman.
I understand what you're saying, but Chairman Roberts, but I think you and the majority leader need to finish y'all's discussion to get to the bottom of this thing.
Okay. All right. What else have I not answered there, boss?
you're sure that the time limit for the addition of the property, you're still bound by the original covenant
Yes.
time limit of 15 years?
Yes.
So if I did this in the 14th year, then I would not be penalized coming, the new land I put in the covenant would not be penalized.
But for that 1 year.
1 year.
That's correct. And you could re-enter it into another covenant now. But for that year, that's all you would get credit for. It would just be for the duration of the existing covenant as it. In other words, if you, like you're saying, if it was in the 14th year and you bought land contiguous to it, then you could add it for that year, and then that would be it. I mean, that 50 acres wouldn't go 14 more years. It would then become part of that original covenant and those acres that was entered into it.
So I've effectively, if I might follow up, eliminated the durational qualification or eligibility qualification rules. I mean, used to the purpose was I was willing to set this property aside for conservation, from development, for a fairly substantial period of time in exchange for a fairly significant tax benefit. Now I don't have that minimum amount of time anymore. Once I have one covenant, I can build on that and set my own time restraints by this additional language that you have here. Am I understanding that correctly? I understood the bill last year and I voted for it. What I don't understand is the addition.
Now, I think the only reason that the addition is there is for you to take additional land that you've bought that's adjoining that property that cannot, if it doesn't meet the 200-acre threshold, and put it in that covenant because of the fact that you don't want to develop it, that you do want to put it in that covenant, and that you're not going to go in and develop it for that duration of that covenant. If you couldn't put it in that covenant, you wouldn't even be able to put it in there for that 1 year. If you had 14 years and you only had 1 year left, you wouldn't even be able to put it in there for that. This is allowing more land to go into the conservation easement program, which is what the intent behind the original bill was.
Mr. Leader, you seem to have a little puzzled look on your face. Is it?
And I just ain't communicating right. I don't know if I'm understanding him and he ain't understanding me, but that's okay.
Representative Black has a question.
Oh, throw in something here that I believe might resolve the leader's concern. If you set it up to where that you could add that, but then be in the process of creating a new covenant for 15 years. So if that person, like he was talking about, that bought a tract adjoining one that had 14 years of it in, if he wanted to consolidate it and save for that 1 year, he could consolidate and create a new 15-year covenant for the entire combination. And that way he could avoid a situation what the Speaker is, I mean, the leader's looking at where he could put that small track in for that 1 year and get that 1 year savings, and then the next year he could turn around and it would be out from under all the covenant, and he could develop the whole track and do whatever he wanted to. You follow what I'm saying? I mean, that's a suggestion y'all to think about.
Vice Chairman Knight.
I'm not sure. We've got some questions that are still here. I'm wondering if it would be advisable right now to just lay this on the table and come back to the matter. Make sure we've got all the concerns ironed out. Would that be all right with the officer?
Sure.
So we make sure that we do that.
You recognize for a motion for that purpose.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion. We lay this House Bill 95 on the table.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Like sign. Chairman Roberts, the chair suggests you and the majority leader have
We'll have a
further
some
dialogue.
conversations. Maybe a little black and blue when you come out.
And we just started it. Okay. Oh, well, he's gone. And now the time for first readers and assigned to committee. Chairman Jay Roberts is first on the list. House Bill 222. Okay, House Bill 228. I'm sorry.
You first reader?
We have one of the authors here.
Okay, he's got a designee. That's fine.
You want to do the first reader?
Yeah.
Okay. Which one, 222?
Can you do this? You're on that bill. Jay just got up.
No, Representative Sims, the author of the bill has to give a short explanation or his designee. Are you his designee?
No, sir. I'm just doing the first reader.
Well, ain't no use to doing it because there's
Okay.
nobody here.
All right. He's his designee.
Representative Stevens, it sounds like you've been drafted to be a designee. Do you accept that? No, that's fine. I don't want to be too technical, but you know, the process is that the author is supposed to be here or have a designee, and I didn't. So we have some volunteer designees. Is that? Okay.
You want me to read the first reader? Let me do that.
Yes.
Okay. To amend Code Section, House Bill 222 by Representative Roberts and others, to amend Code Section 48729.12 of the Official Code relating to income tax credit for donation of real property for conservation purposes.
Mr. Chairman, I am, I think, included in the others, so I think I am a sponsor of this bill.
You may proceed.
It's okay. This bill basically provides an opportunity for a transfer of tax credits under the conservation use process, and just establishes that those tax credits can be transferred. That's the purpose of the bill.
Okay. Questions of Representative Peak? Oh. Okay. The bill goes to the Income Tax Subcommittee, chaired by Chairman Alan Peak. Next is House Bill 228.
Representative.
Representative Rick Austin.
Okay. House Bill 228 to amend the Code Section 48867 Official Code relating to distribution of unidentifiable sales and use tax proceeds so as to repeal certain provisions regarding the limitations on the State Revenue Commissioner's authority to make those certain distributions.
Thank you, Mr.
Oh, I'm
Chairman. This bill deals with unidentifiable sales and use tax proceeds. They're local taxes. This bill was originally carried by the former chairman, Richard Royal. I carried it 2 years ago, and in both cases, this particular bill had a sunset date on it. That sunset date is due to finish, and so we need to re-up it if we want to continue down that road. I will say that 2 years ago, the Attorney General was asked to render a decision on whether or not these particular taxes could be utilized by the state, and his official opinion was that they could not. These are local taxes, and this is a mechanism for us to disperse those local taxes back to local governments on a pro rata basis.
Questions of the author? Seeing none, it goes to sales tax. And Chairman Ben Harvin. House Bill 233.
House Bill 2. This is Representative Roberts' bill. Do you have a designee?
House Bill 233. The author is no.
You want to hold it?
Yes. Go to the next one. House Bill 259.
House Bill 259 by Representative Geisinger and others. Is Representative Geisinger here? Okay. To amend Titles 40 and 48 of the Official Code relating respectively to motor vehicles and revenue taxation, so as to provide for the comprehensive revision of taxation of motor vehicles.
Yeah, I think you are now.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, this is very similar to what was House Bill 480 that we passed out of the House 2 years ago by about 133 positive votes, and passed out of the Senate Finance Committee without a dissenting vote, and needless to say, died in the Senate. What it simply does is it removes the sales tax from vehicles, that is the sale of a vehicle, and removes the birthday tax from any vehicle after this act becomes effective, so that you will no longer have an ad valorem tax on your vehicle, and at the same time you will not have sales tax during the sale. Now you say, how are we going to make it up? There will no longer be a casual sale. All cars will have a one-time title fee of 6 3/4% of the value of the vehicle. That's the gist of what it does, Mr. Chairman. It goes into the details of how it's dispersed and so forth.
Questions of the author? Public Finance, Chairman Ron Stevens.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. House Bill 287, Representative Sims.
House Bill 287 to amend Code Section 48.8.3 of the Official Code relating to the sales and use exemption for eligible food and beverages to provide for a partial suspension of the exemption. Ready, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Explain the bill, sir.
Basically, this is the doing away of the exemption on sales tax on food, with the exemption that would apply that the sale amount up to $100 or less would you would not have. You would have to, if you were over 65, you wouldn't have to pay that. That's basically all the bill does, is just do away with the exemption.
Questions of the author? Seeing none, the Sales Tax Subcommittee, Chairman Ben Harbin. House Bill 289, Representative Welch.
House Bill 289 by Representative Welch and others to amend Part 1, Article 2, Chapter 5, Title 48 of the Official Code relating to ad valorem tax exemptions to revise definition and provide for related matters.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Representative Welch here present this bill. This is a narrow exception to the ad valorem tax for homestead, and this applies solely to Butts County, and it's been on the books since before the 1983 constitutional amendment that would have done away with pot bills. This one applies to allow for an exemption where rental property is, you had a property that's been in rent for at least 3 years before you make application for the homestead exemption.
Questions of the author? Seeing none, ad valorem.
You have a question?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Chairman Williams.
This may be something that's happened since I've been around. This being a population bill, are they still allowed to?
I'm not sure, to be frank about it.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Sure.
Yes, sir. If under Code Section 28115, I believe it is, where the General Assembly adopted before, allows for population bills that were pre-existing in the Constitution to remain in effect, so long as you were not modifying the substance of it, only adjusting the population for that particular jurisdiction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? Ad valorem Subcommittee, Chairman Roger Williams. House Bill 291, Representative Harrell.
Mr. Representative Harold, okay, here you go. To amend Article 1, Chapter 5, Title 48 of the Official Code relating to general provisions regarding ad valorem taxation of property so as to provide that the property tax bill shall not include any non-tax related fees or assessments.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill would require local governments to bill property taxes and only property taxes on their property tax bills.
Questions of the author? The Ad valorem Subcommittee, Chairman Roger Williams. House Bill 306, Chairman Ron Stevens.
House Bill 306 by Representative Stevens to amend Code Section 4883 of the Official Code relating to exemptions from state sales and use tax, provide for an exemption from the state sales and use tax only with respect to certain sales to qualified job training organizations.
Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a series of sunset bills that are that are due now, and these are just re-upping those sunsets and putting 2 more years on them. This particular one has to do with the goodwill industry and to specifically in respect to jobs training credit on sales tax of the goods that they sell.
Questions of the author? Seeing none, Sales Tax Subcommittee, Chairman Ben Harvin. House Bill 312, Representative Ash.
Is she here?
Is Representative Ash or a designee present? House Bill 317.
House Bill 317 by Representative Stevens of the 164th to amend Code Section 4883 of the Georgia Code Annotated relating to exemptions from sales and use tax to extend an exemption for limited period of time regarding the sales to certain nonprofit volunteer health clinics.
Representative Stevens.
Another one of those sunsetted bills, Mr. Chairman, specifically designated for those nonprofit volunteer health centers.
Questions of the author? Seeing none, Sales Tax Subcommittee, Chairman Ben Harvin. House Bill 318, Representative Stevens.
House Bill 318 by Representative Stevens to amend Code Section 4883 of the Official Code relating to exemptions from sales and use so as extended for a limited period of time, and exemption with respect to the use of food which is donated to qualified nonprofit agency and which is used for hunger relief purposes.
Chairman Stevens and Jeremy, you can just leave his mic on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just another attempt to make sure that we have absolutely no tax base whatsoever. This last bill, the House Bill 318, says is another one of the bills that we passed earlier that has a sunset coming due. This puts 2 more years for food donated to qualified nonprofit agencies.
Questions of the author? Sales Tax, Chairman Ben Harvin. House Bill 319.
House Bill 319 by Representative Stevens to amend Code Section 4883 relating to the exemptions from sales and use tax so as to extend the exemption from sales and use tax only for a limited period of time regarding to the sales and use of tangible personal property to certain nonprofit health centers.
Chairman Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, this bill here incorporates all of those sales tax measures into one bill so that we won't have to waste a whole lot of the time with the committee, and it puts all of these particular bills into one.
Any questions of Representative Stevens?
Why didn't you just introduce that one first?
Sales Tax Subcommittee, we're loading the absent Chairman Harvin's wagon pretty good. House Bill 320, Representative Stevens.
Representative Stevens of the Under 64 to create a Development Authority, a Jobs Assistance Act, of 2011 to amend Code Section 4883 of the official code relating to exemption from sales and use tax, provide for exemption for certain sales or leases in connection with development authority projects.
Representative Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, this is not a sunset provision. This is a new bill that was brought to us by the economic developers all over the state to allow to exempt sales tax on the projects that they themselves have to do the sales of those projects of, if that makes sense.
Questions of the author? Seeing none, public finance, Chairman Ron Stevens. House Bill 321, Representative Stevens.
House Bill 321 by Representative Stevens and others to amend Chapter 8, Title 48 of the official code relating to sales and use taxes to provide for a program of tax refunds for companies creating new tourism attractions.
Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This was not formerly known as the Tourism Destination Bill. It was vetoed last year. It was passed out unanimous the House and Senate 3 times before. That gives up to a 25% tax credit on the sales, the proceeds, as over a 10-year period for major projects to locate in the state of Georgia. It's something we've got approval from the governor's office. He has his floor leader as the second signer, and it is a perfected bill the 4th time around.
Questions of the author? Hearing none, sales tax, Chairman Ben Harvin. House Bill 322, Representative J. Roberts.
Have we got a designee?
House Bill 325, Chairman Earl Hart.
Do we have a designee? Okay.
House Bill 331,
Representative
Stevens.
Representative Stevens of the 164th to amend Code Section 4883 of the official code relating to exemptions from sales and use tax so as to provide for a limited period of time an exemption from state sales and use tax only with respect to certain sales to qualified job training organizations.
Representative Stevens.
Mr. Chairman, this is also an addition. This is the Goodwill bill with a change in the original bill 306, and it's in the omnibus bill.
Questions for the author? Seeing none, sales tax, Chairman Ben Harvin. House Bill 333, Representative Stevens.
To amend Code Section 4883 of the official code relating to exemption from sales and use tax to extend for a limited period of time an exemption with respect of use of food donated for disaster relief purposes.
Representative Stevens.
Another sunsetted bill, Mr. Chairman, in the big bill.
Questions of the author? Hearing none, sales tax, Chairman Ben Harvin. House Bill 334, Representative Stevens.
To amend Code Section 4883 of the official code relating to exemptions from sales and use tax to extend the limited period of time and exemption with respect to certain sales of eligible food and beverage to a qualified food bank. Is that nominous?
Representative Stevens.
I think we can turn the mic off now, Mr. Chairman, for this particular one. This is the food bank exemption that sunsets this year in the omnibus bill.
What? Representative Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually don't have a question about that most recent bill, but I do want to go back to House Bill 312.
Which one?
312.
Okay, so you don't have a question on this bill?
Correct.
Does any other member have a question on this bill? Sales tax, Representative Ben Harvin, and I'm sorry, what was that number again?
312, sir.
That's Representative Kathy Ash.
Yes, sir.
You have a question, or are you going to present on her behalf?
I want to present on her behalf, yes.
Okay.
I missed my cue.
You may proceed.
Thank you.
Go ahead. You want me to read it? Okay.
Yes.
To enact Protecting Public Schools Fund Act to amend Title 20 of the Official Code of Georgia relating to education and repeal Chapter 2A relating to student scholarship organizations, to amend Title 48 of the Official Code relating to revenue and taxation.
Representative Flood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill simply would remove the current tax exemption for the special schools that we allow contributions to private schools, and tax exemptions, income tax exemptions are allowed. This would essentially rescind that law.
Questions of the author, Representative I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, as I understand it, this is a repealer of the law that we passed last year, Representative Flood?
It wasn't passed last year. It was probably, I think,
2 years ago?
Probably 3 years ago now.
Representative Stevens.
Representative Flood, I'm trying to remember, was this the one that Senator Johnson carried?
No, I believe it was Representative Earhart.
Okay.
Student Scholarship Program, yes.
Any further questions from the members? Tax Reform Subcommittee Chairman Paul Battles. Representative Peake.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to present Representative Earhart's, Chairman Earhart's Bill 325, so we can get that process going as well, too.
You're recognized for that purpose, House Bill 325. You want to read the
This bill is actually referring to a little bit of what
Representative
Flood was just did. This is a cleanup bill related to the...
Let Secretary Sims read the caption, please.
Yes, sir. Excuse me.
To amend Title 20 and 48 of the Fiscal Code, Georgia Annotated relating respect to education revenue taxation as to revise provision related to student scholarship organizations and revised definitions.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The student scholarship organization that Representative Ash would like to abolish, this is actually a cleanup for some administrative cleanup for that particular scholarship legislation that Representative Earhart intends, that has been brought to us, that several of the private schools have asked us to present. So,
okay. Questions of Representative Peake? Hearing none, income tax. Chairman Allen Peake. Any further business needs to be brought up before this committee? If not, we stand adjourned.